You asked for it, and I'm delivering my New York Giants initial 53-man roster projection prior to the Jets-Giants preseason finale. That's coming your way next on the Locked On Giants podcast.
You are Locked On Giants, your daily New York Giants podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, New York Giant fans, and welcome to another edition of the Locked On Giants podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast family, your team every day. You've got me, P-Train, Patricia Traina, your host, and happy to have you with us, as always, here on the Locked On Giants podcast. Thank you to everybody for making us your first listen of the day, or watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. Shout out to my everydayers, to my subtext community, to my newcomers, and everybody in between. Love you guys all. You are the reason why I do this show, and I appreciate the feedback from each and every one of you. And folks, we're going to have a busy few days here on the Locked On Giants podcast for sure. And before I get into what we're going to cover, today's episode of the Locked On Giants podcast is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code LOCKEDONNFL to receive $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. That is Game Time. Check them out, folks. All right, I mentioned we're going to have a busy next few days here on the Locked On Giants podcast, starting with today, which means I'm going to give you shows every day, starting today, then on Friday, then on Saturday, then on Sunday, and then we're going to roll right into the new week next week. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about the 53-man roster projection. That's right. I was going to initially wait to do this show, and I said, you know what? Why put it off any longer? I've been working on my notes over on Giants Country, and I figured now is as good a time as ever to give you an initial 53-man roster projection, even though the Giants still have one more game to go Saturday night against the Jets. And so that's going to be today's show. We're going to devote it to my 53-man roster projection. Should be fun. And then coming up a little later on in the program, I'll tell you what we've got planned for Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and beyond. So let's get to it. All right. In this segment, I'm going to break this roster projection up into segments, obviously. So I'm going to do quarterback, running back, and tight end in this segment. Pretty straightforward, I think, in this initial segments. For quarterback, I am projecting the Giants keep two, Daniel Jones and Tyrod Taylor. Now, a lot of people say, well, what about Tommy DeVito? You know, there's that new rule that says that you can keep a third quarterback. You can dress a third quarterback on game day. Folks, he has to be part of the 53-man roster. So while he does take up a roster spot on the 53-man squad, where he doesn't take up a spot, as I understand the rule, is on the game day roster, the game day active list, which I think is like 46 guys. So that's where I think the rule comes into play, if I'm not mistaken. But let's talk about Tommy DeVito. DeVito has really surprised me, actually. And I think he's going to end up with a practice squad spot, to be honest with you. According to Pro Football Focus, out of 22 quarterbacks with at least 40 dropbacks, DeVito has a 68.6 completion percentage, which ranks 6th in the preseason. So I do think, like I said, he's going to the practice squad. I do not think they will keep him on the 53-man roster. The reason why I don't think they will keep him on the 53 is because they have some injuries, which we're going to talk about as we go on through these projections. And I think they're going to need that roster spot to where, you know, they just aren't going to have the luxury to keep 3 quarterbacks. So again, 2 quarterbacks on my initial 53, Daniel Jones, Tyrod Taylor. And folks, you're going to hear me say a lot on this show, the initial 53-man roster, because the initial 53-man roster that gets unveiled at 4:00 on August 29th is just that, initial. It's going to change over the next several days and several weeks thereafter. So, you know, you're going to see guys move to injured reserve. You're going to see cuts made, waiver claims, and so on and so forth. So that's why we call it initial. So that's why maybe some of these numbers are going to sound screwy to you, but there's a method behind everything, I promise you. All right, let's take a look at running backs. I've got the Giants keeping 4 running backs on this roster. Saquon Barkley, Matt Breida, Eric Gray, and Jashawn Corbin. That's right, I have Jashawn Corbin beating out James Robinson and Gary Brightwell. Now, it's interesting here because I think if you had asked me at the start of camp, would I have had Corbin beating out Gary Brightwell? I probably would have said, nah, probably not. Brightwell has been injured, first off. Second off, he was last year's kickoff returner, as you know. This year, that job is going to Eric Gray. And even though Gary Brightwell can play all 4 special teams units, so can just Sean Corbin. And oh, by the way, Corbin has looked pretty good this summer. All right, as out of working with the offense. So Corbin, let's give you some stats here. He's averaged 2.4 yards after contact and has a respectable 82.5 NFL rating coming out of the backfield as a receiver. Patience. He's shown patience in his running. Against the Panthers, he broke 3 tackles out of 7 rushing attempts. And he has speed. And he's really, to be honest with you, looked like the best of the running backs this summer. Barkley hasn't played, but Corbin, to my eyes at any rate, has looked like the best of the running backs. So that's why I have him making the roster over James Robinson and Gary Brightwell. Gary Brightwell, I'm not sure if they put him on IR. If they do, they would have to add him to the 53-man roster. But I'll be able to give you an update on that when we get to the revised or the roster projections that I'm going to do over on Giants Country. And I'll mention that, also on the show when I do my updated roster projections coming up over the weekend. But in order for Gary Brightwell to go on IR and for them to bring him back, they would have to put him on the initial 53. So that's to be determined as I get more information as to where he stands with that injury. I mean, I'm not even sure if it's an ankle or a knee. I forget what it is. I know it's a lower body injury, but I'm going to see if I can find out a little bit more regarding that injury and where he stands. Okay. Tight end. Now, I'm sorry. Let's do wide receiver first, and then we'll close with tight end. Wide receiver. I've got them keeping 7, which is, I think, a lot of people have on their roster projections. Darius Slayton, Isaiah Hodgins, Paris Campbell, Jalen Hyatt, Bryce Ford Wheaton, Cole Beasley, and Sterling Shepard. So that means Colin Johnson, Jamison Crowder, David Sills, Khalil Pimpleton, Jaden Mickens, and Wan'Dale Robinson don't make the initial 53. Wan'Dale, I really think they're going to put him on PUP to start the season. He's on PUP right now. This week, yesterday, as a matter of fact, yesterday being, today's Wednesday, so it was Tuesday. We saw Wan'Dale Robinson actually starting to do some running with the trainers. Wan'Dale, if he hasn't been activated off of PUP at this point, I don't think that, that they're going to activate him in the next day or two. I would be surprised. It just doesn't make sense because now you've got to ramp the kid up. And even though you've got another week to do that, I just think at this point, what's the rush? Go with the 7 that I mentioned. Bryce Ford Wheaton is going to probably make it based on special teams. As a matter of fact, I think Bryce Ford Wheaton is going to edge out another core special teamer that I'm going to talk about later in the program. A lot of people are probably wondering why I have both Cole Beasley and Sterling Shepard on the roster. Because I think Beasley will probably take on some of what maybe Robinson would have ordinarily have done had he been healthy. But, Beasley, I know he's had some injuries issues. He's missed some pieces of camp, but he knows this offense. So I'm not too concerned about that. Shepard, why do I have Shepard making it despite the fact that he's being slowly ramped up? Because if this team needs to make a procedural move, Shepard's the guy they're going to do it with. Now, what do I mean by procedural move? If they decide they need to keep an extra guy on the roster at a specific position and they need to steal a roster spot, they're going to steal Sterling's spot. And the way it works is they will cut Sterling Shepard, or terminate his contract, I should say, and just tell him, hey, Sterling, look, we need the roster spot temporarily. Once we move everybody to IR, that we're going to move to IR, and we open up roster spots, we'll re-sign you. So that's what I mean when I say a procedural move. So, yeah, I don't think there's a great rush to get Robinson on the roster. I know he's getting close, obviously, but at this point, you might as well just let the kid just continue working his way back. And otherwise, that's going to make for an interesting scenario. I think if they bring him back, then I wonder if Beasley makes the roster. But, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit there. All right. Tight ends. I have 3 making it: Darren Waller, Daniel Bellinger, and Lawrence Cager. Those were the 3. That hasn't changed at all. I mean, Tommy Sweeney, Chris Myrick, and Ryan Jones, don't see them making it. Now, I do think they put one of those 3 of Sweeney, Myrick, and Jones on the practice squad. The best candidate, in my opinion, for that, if they can get him, is Myrick. Myrick can block. He could also be a receiver for them. In 39 pass blocking snaps, Myrick has yet to give up a single pressure this preseason. He can line up in the backfield as a fullback if you need him to. Just has, a little bit more versatility, I think, than Sweeney and Ryan Jones. Ryan Jones being basically a linebacker converted to tight end. He played linebacker, I think, his first 2 years in college, and he's still kind of new to the tight end position. Sweeney, for those of you who are wondering, if you missed the news during Wednesday's practice, Sweeney had to be carted off the field after having what the Giants called a medical event. Now, they didn't specify what it was. I don't want to speculate as to what it was. But they did say, the Giants, that is, say that Sweeney was alert, that he was, talking to people, and just, it was a positive report after he had been evaluated by the medical people that were in the facility. So I think, and again, I don't want to speculate here, but if it was something really, significant, I suspect Sweeney would have been taken right to the hospital. And the Giants, in their statement, specifically said that he was being treated by medical people in the athletic training room. So just trying to connect the dots there. Again, I don't want to speculate, but I will say this. I wish Tommy Sweeney rapid health. I hope that whatever he had was not serious and that he's going to be fine. Doesn't mean that I think he's going to make the roster, but, I hope the guy is going to be okay. All right. Coming up in the next segment, offensive line, defensive line, and linebackers. Don't go anywhere. Hey, Giant fans, if you want to secure tickets to your favorite concerts, shows, and sporting events without stress, then you need to check out Game Time. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets right up until the day of the event. With amazing deals on last-minute tickets and their best price guarantee, you can stop stressing over the tickets and start getting hyped for the fun that you're going to have. With Game Time, you not only get the lowest prices guaranteed, you also get clear images of the seats you select and event cancellation protection. And if you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Game Time will credit you 110% of the difference. So go ahead and snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Terms apply. Again, that's code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. You got the P Train leading the way on this initial roster projection, 53-man roster projection. Patricia Train, I just can't adapt to that P Train nickname, although it's interesting. My late mother, used to sometimes call me P Train, which is where I kind of got the idea from. So it was P Train or PT, whatever. So take your pick. They're both fine with me. So anyway, we are doing an initial 53-man roster projection. Now, I told you at the start of the program that we were going to have a really busy show the rest of the week. So just to give you a quick rundown of what I've got planned, tomorrow I have special guest Ralph Ventre, who is the publisher of Jets Country over on S-Size Fan Nation. Ralph is going to help me preview the Giants Jets preseason finale. You know, Aaron Rodgers is playing, the starters are playing. So we're going to do kind of like what we've been doing all along, you know, for the last two preseason games with our Locked On hosts. Unfortunately, Johnny Butchko, who is Locked On Jets, he's out of the country, so he's not available to tape with me. But Ralph Ventre is going to tape with me. Really good guy. I think you're going to like him, folks. So I'm looking forward to that. Then Ed Valentine and I are going to do a show, basically where the roster stands. We're going to kind of wrap up training camp because this is technically the last week of training camp. The Giants go into their regular in-season schedule starting next week. So Ed Valentine will be on with me, and we'll actually run that show for you on Saturday. Then on Sunday, I have planned a post preseason roster projection show. So I'll be weighing in, and I'll also be joined by the lovely and talented Nick Filato. He will be on the program with me, and we'll be talking about the roster. And the other thing I'm going to try and do, and I'm not sure where the show's going to fit in. It might be Monday's show. David Turner coming back with me as well. So you can see I've got a jam-packed taping schedule for you guys, and just hope you enjoy it. And oh, by the way, to my subtext community members, those of you who are watching, get your questions in. Check out the videos that I've been sending you. The details are in the show notes. I will do a video for you as well over the weekend. So make sure you get that to me. All right, let's get back to business here because we still have a lot more positions to cover here. So we're going to do offensive line, defensive line, and inside linebacker. We'll start with offensive line. This one, folks, was tough for me because I wasn't sure if I was going to go with 9 or 10 on this one. Initially, I went with 9. All right, so I've got Andrew Thomas, Ben Bredesen, John Michael Schmitz, Mark Lewinsky, Evan Neal, Joshua Ezeudu, Tyree Phillips, Marcus McKethan, and Matt Peart, making the initial 53. Out, Shane Lemieux, Corey Cunningham, Jack Anderson, Wyatt Davis, Sean Harlow, Julian Davenport, and those I've got those guys out. Now let's talk a little bit about it. I think the starters, Thomas Bredesen is going to be the left guard, I believe. Schmitz at center. Glowinski's going to be right guard. Evan Neal will be right tackle. I got Ezeudu possibly rotating in there with Bredesen. I think down the line, they really would like for Ezeudu to become their left guard. And Bredesen's the guy that, you know, they've been getting him snaps up and down the interior of the offensive line. So, you know, I think they want to have a backup just in case, you know, there is an injury somewhere along the line. And it's the same situation with Glowinski, who's actually been taking snaps at left guard on, you know, in these latter part of the training camp practices. All right. Now, Tyree Phillips, I've said all along that I think he's going to be like, you know, one of the top backups. He gives some guard tackle depth. Matt Peart, you know, hasn't been horrible, but, you know, I think he makes the initial 53. I really do. He can only give them offensive tackle depth. And, you know, I'll be honest with you, I had some doubts about adding him because ideally your backups should be able to give you depth at multiple positions. But I kept Marcus McKethan, even though Marcus was just added off of the PUP list about a week ago, and he's still ramping up. I don't think he would be, you know, active on game days, at least until he gets ramped up. But Marcus McKethan has been working at guard and tackle. So I guess the only one I'm really not sure on is Peart. And I have him making it ahead of, say, Shane Lemieux and Jack Anderson. You know, I kind of went back and forth between Peart and Shane Lemieux. Lemieux can give them snaps at center and guard, but, you know, Lemieux's game, you know, just I don't know. I just couldn't add him just yet. Now I might change my mind after we see the Jets performance, his performance against the Jets, but that's the direction I went in. And it's possible also that the Giants might pick up an offensive lineman off waivers. We got to take that into consideration, but that's way down the line. I can't even predict that because I don't know who's going to be cut from other teams. So we'll have to see how that happens. As they get cut, maybe we'll take a look at some of those guys and see if there might be some interest or something. But anyway, defensive lineman. I'm keeping 6. I know that sounds like a lot, but I'm keeping 6. Dexter Lawrence, Leonard Williams, Ashawn Robinson, Raheem Nunez-Roches, Jordan Riley, and I'm keeping Ryder Anderson, even though I think Ryder Anderson is still dealing with that triceps injury and could end up on injured reserve to start the year. Remember, in order to be on IR, to be brought back later in the season, they have to be on the initial 53-man roster. I could see that happening with Ryder Anderson, a guy that I know they like. I have Jordan Riley making it because, quite honestly, the kid has looked good. And with the injuries that have caused Robinson and Nunez-Roches to be in and out of the training camp practices, Riley's, can give them some decent depth. So I think, it's not a bad idea to carry Jordan Riley because if they try to get him through to the practice squad, I don't think it'll work. I really don't. So you might not see Riley, if they do go with 6 and assuming all 6 are healthy, Riley will probably be inactive on game days, but, at least put him on the 53 so that you don't run the risk of losing him. All right. Now, inside linebackers. I have 4. Okereke, Beavers, McFadden, Carter Coughlin. Out. Ray Wilburn, Deontay Johnson, Troy Brown, Cam Brown. That's one of my surprises. And in the last segment, I spoke, when I was talking about running backs and how, you got to be able to give stuff not only on special teams if you're at the bottom of the depth chart at your position, but also at the position that you play. Cam Brown, even though he was a special teams captain last year, can't really give this team anything as far as linebacker snaps go. And quite frankly, folks, Carter Coughlin has been a better special teams player. He led the team, Carter Coughlin, that is, led the team last year in tackles. Cam Brown, I think he was total tackles. I think Cam Brown was second, but not a whole lot of impact plays. Carter Coughlin, much, much better as a special teamer. This summer, Coughlin currently leads the Giants' special teams with 2 tackles to Brown's 1. And by the way, Coughlin has played in 20 special team snaps to Brown's 9. So you kind of see the drop off there. Brown played most of his snaps early on in the first preseason game, and they've been dwindling. So, that's a surefire sign that maybe his roster hold is not as solid as it might have once been. As far as who I think is going to be the starter at inside linebacker next to Okereke, I think it's going to be a rotation between Beavers and McFadden. All right, now it's possible that the Giants could pick up somebody, who's on the streets. Anthony Barr was in, not too long ago for a workout. They didn't sign him. So it's possible that the Giants are just waiting to see how these, this last game goes and if they have to make a move. But right now, based on what I had to work with as far as information, I think there's going to be a rotation. McFadden maybe as a starter, but you'll see Beavers in certain packages. So that's how I see the inside linebacker position playing out for the Giants. All right, folks, coming up next, I've got outside linebacker, safety, cornerback, and special teams. So do not go anywhere. All right, everybody, welcome back to the Locked On Giants podcast. I'm your host, Patricia Traina, and I'm running down the 53-man roster projection. And for my Sunday show, which I mentioned we're going to have with Nick Filato, I'm putting together some graphics to make it a little bit, easier to follow with the roster. So that'll be for Sunday's show because again, we'll have a little bit more information. So this is just a very preliminary rundown of the Giants 53 man initial roster projection, my rundown, because you guys asked for it. And when you ask me for stuff, I try and bring it to you because that's what I do because I love you guys. All right, let's get back to these last remaining positions. Outside linebacker, I have them keeping 5. Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, Tamon Fox, Jihad Ward, and we got a surprise here, Tayshawn Bauer. I have them keeping him over O'Shane Zimenez and Habakkuk Baldonado. Baldonado, I think, maybe goes to the practice squad. All right, so why Tayshawn Bauer over O'Shane Zimenez? One simple reason, folks. Bauer has been better against the run than Zimenez. All right. So on 27 run defensive snaps through 2 games, he has a team leading run stop percentage of 14.8, according to Pro Football Focus. His next closest competition is Tamon Fox, 8.0 in 24 snaps. And then you have Zimenez, 4.0 in 26 snaps. Folks, one of the major issues in Zimenez's game has always been his run defense, and that doesn't look like it's gotten any better. So if you're going to have an edge rusher, you're going to want a guy who can pressure the quarterback and, most importantly, hold up on the edge against the run. Bauer just looks like, a guy who can do that. And if you need more stats, again, for pass rushing, Zimenez is ahead of Bauer by a hair in terms of pass rush win rate. So Zimenez has a 20 pass rush win rate to Bauer's 19. So bottom line, if playing defense is all about stopping the run and rushing the passer, you got to give the edge to Bauer in this case for that last spot on the outside linebacker depth chart. All right, let's go to cornerbacks. This one, this one was tricky because there's some injuries involved here, but in the end, I kept 5. So I've got Adoree Jackson, Deontay Banks, Cordell Flott, Trey Hawkins III, and I kept Zion Gilbert, which means not making my initial 53. Aaron Robinson, who I am 99.9% sure is going to start the year on PUP because he just seems no closer to being ready than he was at the start of training camp. Amani Oruwari, I have him not making it. I have Jamon Green not making it. Darren Evans not making it. And Darnay Holmes, I don't have making it. This one was tough. I'll be honest with you. Holmes has not been horrible this summer. But, you look at what the Giants are looking to do with trying to get Trey Hawkins on the field and then putting Adoree Jackson down in the slot. I don't know if they plan to do that on a regular basis. I don't know if they plan to, have a rotation or a committee approach in the slot. I think that is the plan. I do know that, that $2.7 million cap hit that Holmes has, that's a big, big pill to swallow, whether, unless you're keeping him as your full-time slot cornerback. If you're keeping him as a part-timer with reduced snaps, I don't see how you keep it. Now, you could say, okay, well, maybe they go to him and they ask him to take a pay cut like they did with Darius Slayton. I don't know that that's going to be the case, folks. I think, Zion Gilbert, has played a little bit better. They do have Nick McLeod who can play cornerback, even though Nick McLeod has been injured, and he's also been working at safety when he wasn't injured. And McLeod can come down in the slot. They have options for the slot. So I just don't think that Holmes survives this. It's just a gut feeling that I have. Nothing personal against Holmes, but, the fact of the matter is they've been trying to draft over him basically ever since he got here. So we'll see if that's how it works out, but I don't feel good about him making it. I really don't. So, all right, safeties. Right now, I have 5 making it at safety. It's probably too much, but I have 5. I've got McKinney, Jason Pinnock, who are going to be your starters in all likelihood, Dane Belton, Nick McLeod, and Gervarius Owens. Now, I wonder if perhaps McLeod, if that injury is still significantly bothering him, and I don't know what is it. I think his injury is a stomach or an abdomen, one of the two. I could see them maybe moving him to IR if that injury is significant enough to cost him, additional weeks. So that decision doesn't have to be made, right away, but that's a possibility. Not making the team, I have Bobby McCain and Alex Cook. Bobby McCain, I haven't really seen a whole lot to get excited about, me personally, at any rate. I just think the younger guys are where it's at. And that's how I think the coaches will go when it comes to, that position. Um, like I said, I think Dane Belton is probably going to be the third safety in the package, like the big nickel. Pinnock is dealing with an injury, but he's day to day, according to Brian Dable. So I think Pinnock is going to be okay by the time they start the season or start getting ready for the week of Dallas, the Dallas week that's coming up. So I'm not too concerned there with Pinnock just yet. All right. Now, final group. This is kind of, nothing to see here. Specialists in Gano, punter Jamie Gillen, long snapper Casey Kreider. Cam Lyons, I think they try and move to the practice squad. Now, a lot of you have said to me, Pat, what are the odds that the Giants move on from Jamie Gillen, who has had his continued ups and downs? I don't think they move on from him, folks. I think they're going to stick it out with him, see what happens with better gunners, with better coverage people. That's how I think it's going to play out. Now, if Gillen really keeps messing up, if he's good for one bad punt per game, if he continues to outkick the coverage, I think at that point, if you're the Giants, you got to stop and ask yourselves, what are we doing here? And maybe look in another direction. But they don't want to give up on Gillen because he does have that big, strong leg. He is a left-footed punter. And oh, by the way, he's the holder for Mr. Reliable, Graham Gano. So if they don't have to mess up that kicking battery, I don't think they want to. So we'll see how Gillian continues to progress. I'm not sold on him personally. I would have brought in competition if it had been me, but they felt necessary. They felt it unnecessary, and they decided to bring in an extra long snapper for Cam, a guy who they could maybe develop down the line. And oh, by the way, interesting enough, one of the items that we kept talking about with Casey Kreider last year is that some of his snaps were a little on the slow side. So that's something to keep an eye on as we finish up the preseason, as we get into the regular season. Those snaps have to have a little bit more zip because a slow snap back to the punter can lead to a block. All right. So just something to keep an eye on there as we go into the regular season. All right. So that is my initial 53-man roster projection. Tell me what you think. You can comment below if you're watching on YouTube or if you are listening on any of our audio platforms. You know how to get in touch with me. The info's in the show notes. So I'm curious to hear what you think. And don't forget, Nick Filato and I will be doing a post-preseason roster breakdown. That'll be taped on Sunday, and I will get that show out just as soon as it's done. So we've got lots more on the Locked On Giants podcast. Like I said, the show today, Thursday. We got a show Friday. We're going to have a show Saturday, a show Sunday, and then we're going to start the whole week all over again because there's just so much that we need to talk about. So I hope you enjoyed today's show, everybody. I appreciate you tuning in. As always, making us your first listen of the day, or if watching on YouTube, your first watch of the day. I'm Patricia Traina, and ladies and gentlemen, I will see y'all tomorrow.